The Window by Shaun J. Nigro. Women can be serial killers too. Yeah, but not the really deranged kind. My point is, all the famous women murderers are usually driven by some justifiable rage, and it's a one-time thing. I don't think women have it in them to just kill for no reason. What is that supposed to mean? Wait, why are you mad at that? I thought that would be a compliment. Women can have fun too, you know. Raina winked. It was a ridiculous conversation that had been ignited off the tail end of another Gruesome Murders podcast episode. The show was Raina's current favorite, and she knew this had the potential to make most men uncomfortable. She sometimes wondered why Peter hadn't run for the hills already. "You're twisted." Peter smiled. It was a smile that still made Raina blush, and one she had to admit had prompted her to ask him out the first time they met. "Peter, pay attention to the road." Peter swerved the car just before it could veer into a guardrail. Oops. Shit. He looked into the rearview mirror. Raina turned to look out the back window to confirm what she had suspected. A cop. Jesus, Peter. She slouched into her seat. Peter shot her a concerned look. "It's okay, babe. The cops here aren't so bad." Raina would sooner believe that a monkey could talk. She was not a fan of cops, partly because she had grown up knowing how the majority of them seemed to act around darker-skinned people like her, partly because of what had happened to her mother back in Chicago. He doesn't have his lights on. Peter glanced out his window now. He stopped the car at a red light, and the cop pulled his cruiser into the lane next to them. Raina felt Peter's reassuring grip on her hand, and she gave him a weak smile before looking out of her window, away from the cop. A long moment passed, and Raina could feel her muscles tensing up. It was the familiar prelude to a panic attack that she was trying her best to quell. Her first night in Portland, and she was already embarrassing herself. She knew he was supportive, but she still felt small every time the attacks happened. "He's gone." Peter had driven through the light as soon as it turned green. Raina turned in time to see the cruiser turn left at the intersection behind them. She breathed an audible sigh of relief. "I'm sorry." "You don't have to be sorry." He smiled again, giving her hand one last squeeze before grabbing the steering wheel to turn the car onto her road. They pulled into the first driveway on the right. The old brick building the driveway belonged to stood tall over the street. Raina could see some of the windows lit up, going all the way to the top floor. Since it was late, most of the lights appeared to be out. "You sure you don't want some company tonight?" Peter asked, looking as horny as Raina had predicted he would. He was not usually as forward about it as some of her exes had been, so she didn't mind the advance. "Not tonight." She kissed him once, softly on the lips. "I'm still tired from the drive. Besides, I still have to unpack." "Okay." He smiled. "Hey, give me a call when you wake up. We'll go out to breakfast." "I'd like that." She stepped out of the car and looked up the length of the building again, but looked down again quickly, feeling a little vertigo from the height. "Good night, Petey." She blew him one last kiss before closing the door. She went to the lobby entrance, fumbling for her keys and looking back once more. She knew he would stay until she was in the building. When she unlocked the door, she waved one last time, and he started to back out. Raina climbed a narrow set of stairs to the third floor, where her apartment was. The building looked as old on the inside as it did outside. Every stair seemed to creak with her weight, which was impressive considering she was only 130 pounds, much smaller than most of her friends. She brushed a strand of intricately braided hair away from her face as she searched for her apartment key. Upon signing the rental contract, she had been given a set of more keys than she had ever had at one time in her life. There was the building key, the apartment key, a key for the mailbox, and a key to the basement where the laundry machines were. "I was wondering when they'd fill that apartment." A gruff voice came from across the hallway. "Excuse me?" Raina turned, a little frightened by the sudden noise. Standing in the doorway to the apartment directly across from hers was a large man with an unshaven face and a head of wild brown hair that made him look like he'd just been electrocuted. Except for the hair color, the man reminded her of Doc Brown from Back to the Future. "That apartment." He gestured toward her door. "It's been listed for at least a year." "Why, is it haunted?" Raina laughed. "No, nothing like that." The man smiled. "At least I don't think so." "I know the woman who lived there before passed away, but the landlady said she wasn't here when it happened." "Well, that's true. She fell unconscious, but she officially died in the hospital. I don't think it was anything mysterious or anything like that. Just old age catching up to her." Raina smiled, standing in her doorway awkwardly. "She was kind of weird, though. No cats, but she was the resident cat lady, if you catch my drift. I'm sorry, I'm standing here in my bathrobe. I didn't mean to scare you, just wanted to say hi to my new neighbor. I'm Adam." He smiled, reaching a meaty hand out across the hall, which was almost as narrow as the stairway. Raina hesitated at first, but thought she didn't want to make a bad first impression on someone she would be sharing the building with for the foreseeable future. "I'm Raina." She shook his hand, almost yanked forward by his strong grip, and immediately retreated to her doorway. "It'll be nice to have some normal neighbors for a change." He winked, and Raina stifled a laugh. A large, frazzle-haired man in a bathrobe was glad to have normal neighbors. She couldn't pretend to understand this man's vibe, but she had literally just moved into the building and state and had to assume the best, or she would drive herself and Peter crazy. "Yeah, I'm sorry. I just got in from Chicago today. I'm—" "Of course, dear. My bad. Well," he put his hands on his hips and looked up and down the hallway as if he had forgotten something. "Have a good night, and I guess I'll see you around the building." Raina closed the door behind her slowly and softly, so as not to come off as rude. She dropped her purse and keys on what little kitchen counter space she had, which was located directly next to the entrance, and she looked around, taking in her new home. She had, of course, seen the apartment already, and there were still boxes sprawled out, begging to be unpacked, but this was the first time she could truly call it her own. As small as the place was, fit for a munchkin if anything, it was home. Raina hadn't felt like she was home for most of her life. She grew up in a small suburb outside of Chicago with her parents, but her actual home life had been far from perfect. Her father had been an abusive alcoholic cop, and though he had never touched her, she lived in constant fear for her mother. Her fears had been justified the night he came home with a temper, for what reason she could not remember, and taken it out on her poor mother. Her mother never spoke of it, and this seemed to make it worse for Raina. The bruises and black eyes her mother would constantly try to hide made Raina feel helpless. Even worse, her mother would try to justify her father's actions whenever she began to ask. "He's just stressed, honey. Mommy is okay. Why don't you go watch some TV?" Raina vowed to leave the house as soon as she could, and did just that on her 17th birthday. But Chicago became unlivable the night she was cornered by 2 police officers. She had told Peter, who had been going to school in Chicago at the time, but she left out the worst parts of the story. And, she thought, she'd probably keep that much to herself for the rest of her life. Portland was where Peter's family was from, and after a couple years of begging, Raina decided a change of pace would be good. And that's my story, she thought as she looked out the window beside her bed. She could see some of downtown Portland from her room, still alight and crawling with pub-goers on account of it being Saturday. She sat down and opened a small box on her bed. Pictures of her and Peter. Pictures of her mother. The ones with her father had been cut so she could remember her mother alone. But the pictures always brought back memories of the cop in their house whom she had tried so hard to forget. She knew from a quick Google search that he was still a police officer, but at least he wasn't terrorizing her mother anymore. She had found out in the same search that she had passed, and though the obituary did not specify the cause of death, she thought she could guess. Raina wiped a tear from her face and stood up to open a small closet by her bed. She put the pictures back in the box and reached to put them on a single shelf at the top of the closet, above some clothes she had started hanging before Peter picked her up earlier that day. She froze when she heard a woman's muffled cry for help. "Help me, please." Raina left the box on the shelf and backed up from the closet. She was about to chalk the sound up to a TV set somewhere echoing through thin walls, something cheap apartments tended to have in common, in her experience, when the voice came again. "Please help me, someone," the voice sounded, still muffled and starting to cry. Raina felt goosebumps prickle up along her arms. "Hello?" There was no answer, but Raina thought she could still hear muffled cries. The sound did appear to be coming from the closet, but that, Raina thought, was impossible. The closet space was not even big enough to fit her entire body into, but the voice came again. "Hello? Please help me." It was louder now. Raina reached into the closet and pushed her clothes aside, but she could only see the wall. "Please hurry," the voice cried again. Raina ran out of her room and into the bathroom on the other side of the wall. Impossible. She stepped into the old clawfoot bathtub and put her ear against the wall. "Hello?" She tried, but there was no sound there, not even the muffled whimpers she could just barely make out in her bedroom. "Hello? Can you hear me?" "Help me, please," she heard finally, but the voice was coming from her bedroom again. As Raina walked back into her bedroom, she glanced at the wall protruding out from the doorframe. It was a normal-sized wall that looked only big enough to fit PVC for plumbing and electrical wiring. "Please help me. They're coming." Raina ran back to the closet. "I don't know where you are." She waited for another response. "Hello?" "No, please, no," the voice cried. "Why are you doing this?" Raina's heart pumped hard in her chest as she heard a blood-curdling scream, followed by silence. "Hello?" she said a little lower. As she stared into the closet, tracing the popcorn wall paint from the ground up to the ceiling, she thought she could see a small crack forming in the paint. The crack was at the height of her stomach. She started to peel the paint away. What the hell? As she peeled the paint, she thought she saw glass. She began to peel faster, making a note to buy more paint before the landlord ever saw the inside of the apartment again. But as she peeled even more, she became confused. She could see an old wooden sill now. It appeared to be a window. She stopped peeling when there appeared to be nothing more but wall past the window's edges. Standing back again, she scratched her head at the unusual sight. She looked out the real window to her right, and then back to the window in the closet. What is this, friggin' Narnia? The window did not appear to go anywhere, not even into the wall. It was just pitch black. She stepped forward and rubbed her hand along the glass, surprised at how warm it was. Raina jumped at the sound of her cell phone ringing in the kitchen. Jesus! She went to the kitchen and rustled through her purse to find the phone before the call ended. It was Peter. "Hey, Rainey, just wanted to say goodnight again." Raina smiled, feeling a little calmer. Aw, that's sweet. Are you gonna annoy me every night now that I live so close? You know, some boyfriends don't call their girlfriends at all. Raina went back into her bedroom with the phone and stood in front of the old window again. So I just found something freaking weird here. Oh, yeah? Yeah. She put her hand on the glass again. There's a window in my closet. A window? Yeah, along the wall next to the bathroom. That's weird. Maybe it goes to Narnia, he joked. Raina laughed. That's what I thought. It's almost like we were made for each other. Raina paused, trying to think of how to word what she was going to say next. The weirdest part of this is that I found it because someone was screaming for help. Whoa, that's fucking creepy. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. And the screaming stopped, but it kinda spooked me. I'll bet you tomorrow's breakfast it was someone's TV coming through the walls. That's how my old apartment downtown was. I thought that too, but I can come over if you want, Peter said hopefully. No, Raina shook her head, aware of how crazy she was sounding. No, you're right. She went back into the kitchen. Thin walls. Someone's probably listening to gruesome murders, and the window was probably covered at some point during renovations. It is an old building. Yeah, most of those buildings downtown are pretty old. Okay, Rainy, I love you. I love you too, Petey. I'm fine, I promise. I'll call you when I wake up. Raina sighed, ending the call. Home sweet home. At least a month passed before Raina heard the sound of someone screaming in her closet again. Help me, please! Raina jolted up in her bed. She had been having a nightmare about her mother. She checked her cell phone to find that it was 3 a.m., witching hour. Please get me out of here. I can't see anything. Please, where am I? Raina turned the light on and opened the closet door slowly, half expecting someone to leap out at her, but all that was there was her clothes. She pushed the clothes aside to reveal the window, which was still dark. Help! With the wall paint peeled now, Raina could hear that the voice was definitely coming through the glass. Though it seemed crazy, she thought this time she might try to open the window. People under the stairs? She guessed, remembering an old movie Peter had shown her once where people were living in the walls of an old house. The window would not budge at first, but it finally gave way after she hit the top half hard. She vaguely hoped she hadn't disturbed any of her neighbors. She was immediately surprised to find hot air wafting through the window onto her face, and the sound of something loud and mechanical. Please help me, the voice cried, sounding like it was in the same room as Raina now. I'm here. Can you hear me? Hello? Please help me, the voice cried, surprised at Raina's voice. I can hear you. Raina hesitated but built up the courage to reach into the darkness of the window. She was surprised to find that the darkness was not darkness at all. It was fabric. I see you. Raina reached both arms through the window now and pushed aside what appeared to be clothing. On the other side of this rack of clothing, she saw a dim light, and she swallowed hard in fear when she saw a woman cuffed to a beam next to an old furnace. She was crying, but seemed happy to see Raina. Oh, thank God! You have to hurry! How did you get here? Raina hadn't dared to climb through the window yet, which appeared to be level with the concrete floor. The woman, apparently, was in some sort of basement. She was beyond questioning the logic of it all, and thought that she might still be sleeping. I don't know, The woman looked at the floor, trying to remember. I was driving home. I was being pulled over. That's all I remember. You're saying a cop put you here? I don't know. The woman began to cry again. Please just help me. Maybe I can try. Raina breathed deep, afraid of what might come next, but she thought the least she could do was help this poor woman, dream or not. She climbed up onto the windowsill, immediately feeling the cold of the concrete on her palms. The furnace stopped rumbling as she crawled the rest of the way through, so that all she could hear was the woman's soft whimpering. "Please hurry. I don't know when they'll be back." Raina stood up in the basement. She looked back and discovered she had crawled through an old mirror sitting on the floor behind a rack of clothes. This is fucking weird. "Please, just hurry." Raina ran across the basement to the woman. "Do you know where the key is? Check the workbench over there." Raina ran to a wooden bench with tools sprawled about. As she rustled through the tools, she froze at the sight of what looked like a blood stain. "What's wrong?" Nothing." She looked up from the bench and saw a pegboard with more tools and a key ring. "Found them." She ran back to the woman and fumbled through an assortment of keys that reminded her of her apartment keys. After trying 4 of them, the cuffs finally clicked open, followed by the sound of crunching gravel and a headlight beam flashing through the basement window. Raina and the woman looked at each other and agreed, without a word, to run. The woman crawled through the mirror to Raina's apartment, and Raina started to fit herself through when she heard the sound of a door opening at the top of the basement stairs. "Hurry!" Raina was shaking now, on the verge of a panic attack, but she managed to get through the window. The sound of stairs creaking came through the window, and Raina remembered the clothes. "Shit, shit, shit," she said as she pulled the clothes in the basement back to the way they had been. She brought the window down and backed out of the closet, pulling her own clothes back together, and finally she closed the closet door. "Do you think we're safe?" The woman's voice came from the other side of the bedroom. Raina turned to find the woman shaking about as much as she was. "I think we're okay," Raina said, wanting as much as the woman to believe this. "Are you going to answer that?" The woman, Catherine, was looking a lot more comfortable now, thanks to the blanket and cup of chamomile tea Raina had given her. "I wouldn't know what to say. I'm still trying to figure out if I'm asleep." Raina was chewing her fingernails, staring at her phone vibrating with Peter's incoming calls. It was close to noon now, and she had already missed a planned breakfast with him. "I hear that." Catherine took a sip of the tea. Most of the morning had been spent calming themselves down, going over the details of the night after finally snapping out of the shock of it happening at all. "We should go to the cops," Catherine said, staring into her tea. It was something both of them had been thinking and not wanting to say. "But that's who took you." I said, "I think that's what happened. I never saw his face." "It's enough for me." Raina tapped the table nervously. "I'm not a fan of cops as it is. Either way, I need to go home." "Where's that?" Raina suddenly realized the implications of the window. For all they knew, it was some sort of portal. The question was still up in the air of where the basement in the other building was located. "I'm from Chicago." Raina bit her tongue. "Excuse me?" "Chicago. That's where I'm from." "From? Where are we now?" "Portland, Maine." They both sat in silence, realizing just how far Catherine had come in a single instance. "It's like Silent Hill meets Narnia." "What's that?" Catherine looked curious. "Silent Hill? It's a video. No, Narnia." Raina stared in disbelief. "Children's book. You know, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Everybody knows it." She just blinked. "At least I assumed everyone knew it. Anyway, it's just about some kids that go through a wardrobe into another world." "Oh." She blinked again, seeming uninterested. "Can I use your phone to call my brother? He could probably pay for my flight home. Of course. Raina handed Catherine the phone. Catherine dialed and waited through rings that Raina could hear over the speaker until a woman's voice answered. Hello, is Jessie there? What do you mean? No, this can't be the wrong number. This has been Jessie's for... She stopped and put the phone down. They hung up. Who was it? No one I've ever met. I'm sorry, Raina, but I need to go to the cops. Even if it was a cop that took me or miles away, I'm sure I'll be fine. Raina couldn't fight the logic, but she did not want anything to do with a police officer. Will you leave me out of it then? Please. I doubt they believe I came from Chicago through a mirror window in a closet anyway. She smiled. I can drive you there at least. That would be nice. Do you mind if I take a shower first? That guy had his furnace blasting. I've been sweating through my clothes since I woke up. Of course, it's next to the bedroom. Thanks, Raina. She finished her tea and left the room, leaving Raina to retrace the events that had brought her there. I'm sorry, Peter. I just wasn't feeling well. You had me worried, Raina. Will you please just shoot me a text next time? Raina sat on her bedside with the phone, looking at the closet. Of course. Hey, I'm gonna get some sleep. I didn't get much last night. You sure you don't need me to bring you anything? I'm sure. Thank you. Okay. I love you, Rainy. Love you too. Raina ended the call and put the phone on the bed beside her. After dropping Catherine off at the police station earlier that day, she came straight home, avoiding her bedroom and the closet for as long as she could. But the couch was notoriously uncomfortable, and she was beginning to grow restless. She had pushed a bureau in front of the closet door to make herself feel better about sleeping in the room, but she still had visions of a large man hammering through the closet door. "Here's Johnny," she imagined the man saying. Given all that she had learned from Catherine, she also imagined the man to be wearing a police officer's uniform, hat and all. Another part of her thought that maybe it had all been a hallucination. Maybe something she had eaten at the restaurant Peter insisted on bringing her to the night before. He had promised the best seafood, and Raina anticipated the worst, though she had to admit it tasted pretty good. Hope so for that price. She rested her head on her pillow, facing the closet, deciding against turning the bedroom light off at least. Keeping the monsters away, she thought, just like when she was little. The exhaustion must have finally gotten a hold of her because Raina found herself pulled from a dream again later that night. She had been dreaming of her mother again, attempting to console her and stop her from whimpering. The whimpering had turned to screaming, and when Raina awoke, she realized the whimpering had been coming from the closet. Again. Please help me. Get me out of here. Raina sat up in her bed, her heart pounding in her chest. This voice was new, though still feminine. He's going to kill me. Please help. The woman started crying again. Raina thought that she wouldn't open the closet door this time, but something in her would not let her sit by. She wished someone had been there to help her in Chicago. Help! I'm coming. She dragged the bureau away from the closet door, not caring how loud she was being. She just knew she had to get to this woman and save her, like she had done for Catherine. I'm coming, don't worry, she shouted louder. She opened the door and pushed her clothes away. She opened the window, having to bang on it a couple times again, and pushed the clothes in the basement aside. There, by the furnace, where Catherine had been, sat another woman. This woman seemed younger and looked as if she had lost some of her clothes. She looked unharmed, but was sweating with the furnace pumping hot air over her. Please help me. Raina crawled through the window and rushed to the workbench, looking for the keys where they had been before, but they were not there this time. Hurry! Where are the keys? I don't know, she cried. I just woke up here. I don't know where this even is. Shit. Raina darted her eyes around the basement. Besides the clothes and the mirror, there wasn't much else in the basement. There was a washer and dryer on planks by a set of basement stairs, and a pail of water catching a slow drip from a leak in a copper pipe that ran overhead. Is there anyone home? I don't know. The woman looked up at her in horror, sweat from the heat dripping off her face. Please help me. I'm trying. Raina looked at the basement stairs again. I'm going to check upstairs. Please, hurry, the woman said weakly. She appeared to be in shock now. Okay. Raina closed her eyes and took a deep breath, taking in the hot air from the furnace and a slight smell of propane. She ran to the stairs and looked up at a door with a small cat flap at the bottom that seemed vaguely familiar. Raina ran up the stairs and slowly opened the door. The house appeared to be dark. She went into what appeared to be a hallway, inching her way along a wall, looking for a light switch. At last, she found one and was disturbed to find that she knew exactly where she was. I'm home. If it was not her childhood home, it was almost an exact replica, minus the photos that had lined the hallway walls and the color of the wallpaper. And if this were her childhood home, she remembered Catherine saying she had been pulled over by a cop, which would mean that the man taking these women was... Raina suddenly felt sick. She leaned against the wall, feeling a panic attack coming on. Get it together, Raina. Get it to fucking together. Remember why you are here. She remembered then that her father had scolded her once as a child for finding and playing with his handcuffs. It was a long shot, but she thought then that she knew where the keys to the cuffs might be. At the end of the hallway, she pushed a door that had been left ajar open and felt for the light switch. This room was not near the driveway, so the light would not be seen by anyone pulling in. The office was in shambles. The large desk, different from the one she remembered her father having, sat on the far end of the room, covered in police documents. On one side of it was a snake plant that looked like it was on the verge of death. The family pictures that had lined the walls were no longer up, but Raina thought this was to be expected. Finally, the old man had realized he wasn't much of a family man. Raina approached the desk and opened a drawer on the right, where she remembered the key being, but it was not there. Shit! She tried the other drawer. Here there was only another pile of documents. Fuck! She tore the drawer out of the desk, scattering the documents around the room. She started to kneel down then at the sight of what she thought was her name at the top of one of the documents when she heard a neighbor dog barking and the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Raina bolted up. She glanced at the desk one last time before running for the door, flicking the light switch off as she left the room. At the other end of the hallway, she could see the top of someone's head through a small window at the top of the front door. She ran for the basement door, seeing the doorknob turn just as she disappeared back into the basement. "Did you find it?" the woman screamed. "Quiet. He's home." Raina tried to skip steps, but her pant leg tugged at a loose nail, causing her to tumble forward onto the basement floor. She wiped the blood from her lip as she stood up and caught sight of the woman gazing terrified back at her. "I'm sorry, I couldn't find it." Raina frowned. "No, you have to help me. He'll kill me." Raina backed toward the mirror in horror. "I'm sorry." She could feel tears falling down her face now. Her last sight of the woman was a look of utter defeat. She knew she had failed and that her father would likely kill her. The lights to the basement flicked on as she crouched back through the clothes and closed the window softly behind her. She pulled her own clothes back together to conceal the window and closed the closet door. Sliding to the floor with her back to the door, Raina couldn't help but cry. That was 2 women she had been unable to rescue from her father now. Or, she thought helplessly, 3. Mom had been the first. She sat like this until the first hint of the day came peeking through her window. That was when she fell asleep. Raina awoke later in the day, when the sun was just beginning to set. Peter had called her multiple times, but she let it go to voicemail. She would call back tomorrow. All she could think about was whether or not she would be able to rescue the next woman. She actually considered calling the Portland police anonymously, however that worked. But she knew she would never be able to do this, even considering the circumstances. She wondered where Catherine had gone, if she had gotten a hold of her brother after all. She still thought it was strange that Catherine had not known what Narnia was. There was something off about her, too, like she had come from another country, despite being from Chicago. Something in the way she spoke to Raina seemed almost alien. Raina jumped at the sound of her phone ringing again. It was Peter. She answered. "Raina, where the hell have you been?" "I'm sorry, Peter." She couldn't mask the sadness in her voice as she stifled the urge to cry. "What's wrong?" "It's nothing. It's just—" "I'm coming over, Raina. You have been distant since you got here. It's not healthy." "It's not you, Peter. It's just—" "Just what, Raina?" She sat silent. "I'm coming over." "Okay." She gave up. "I'll see you in 10. When the bell to her apartment rang, Raina had still not made up her mind about telling Peter of the window. She buzzed him in and waited for him to climb the stairs. "Hey, Rainey." He smiled as she let him in. She could see that he was worried, and she suddenly felt terrible for having ignored him for so long. "You look like you haven't slept in days," he frowned. "I guess I haven't," she said. And then the tears came. "It's okay, Rainey." He put his arms around her as she sobbed. "It's okay to be scared, but you don't have to go through this alone." Raina thought that he was right about her being scared, at least. "Listen," Peter said, pulling her chin lightly up toward his face. "Why don't I stay the night? I promise I won't try anything. I just don't think you should be alone. We can play Scrabble or something." Raina closed her eyes and raised her lips to his suddenly. She peeked once to find that he had closed his eyes as well. She started to grab his arm to wrap around her waist, but he was one step ahead of her. Their tongues were touching now as she pushed tighter against his body, causing him to stumble back into the door. His hands were under her shirt now, sliding up her back, and she felt the stress from the last few days melting away, almost as if he were pulling it away with his grip. She could feel the tears on her face drying as her sadness turned to lust, and knew then that she wanted him inside her. He bit her neck as he unstrapped her bra, and she reached down the front of his pants to stroke him. They were both naked by the time they fell onto Raina's bed. She dug her nails into his back as he gently pushed deeper into her, moving faster, almost in sync with her quickening heartbeat. She embraced the feeling, allowing everything in her mind to slip away. Her childhood, the police in Chicago, the window. The window. "I love you, Raina." "Ah!" Raina's body tensed up. She turned her head to the closet where the scream had come from. Peter kept pushing, his eyes closed. "Help me!" "Yes," Peter panted, but Raina started to push him away. "Peter, that's not me." "Yes." "Ah!" This last scream was blood-curdling. Peter opened his eyes and immediately backed away, seeing the look of terror in Raina's eyes. He looked at the closet. "What the fuck is going on?" "It's the window, in the closet." The scream came again and dragged on until, all at once, the closet went silent. Raina pulled the blanket up to cover herself, and Peter stood up to face the closet. Is there someone in there? In the window. Peter opened the closet door and was confused to find only Raina's clothes. He paused before pushing the clothes aside to reveal the window. There's something I need to tell you, Peter. We have to call the cops, Raina. Not yet, Peter. Peter stopped his pacing at the end of the bed and looked at her seriously. You do realize how insane this is. A window to another world with a serial killer? Not another world. Raina hadn't yet told Peter about the Chicago connection or her father. Somewhere then, I don't know, it's not normal, and someone could get hurt. What if whoever's over there decides to come through to hear? Someone already has. What? I brought a woman back with me the other night. Peter sat down at the end of the bed and stared at the floor with a leg bouncing nervously. Where did she go? She went to the police station, but I told her not to mention the window, or me. What about whoever put her there? They can find him in Chicago just as well as here, Raina said a little louder. She was starting to feel defensive. Peter, I had everything under control before you. Bullshit, Raina. You looked like hell when I came in last night. Whatever this is has been driving you crazy. She couldn't argue with this. Ever since she had discovered the window, she felt like she was slowly losing her mind. Until Peter saw it, she started to think she was imagining it. If you won't go to the police station, then I will. I know you think there's one big cop conspiracy, but I assure you, most of them are decent, and they're going to want to help you. I don't want to talk to the cops, Peter. Peter sighed. They seemed to be at an impasse. Raina felt terrible, but despite everything that had happened, she could not bring herself to even imagine talking to a cop. She thought that deep down she was worried her father might find her. Well, what about this woman? What about her? Did she go back to Chicago? I told you, she went to the police station on her own. I guess she would have gone back to Chicago. And yet, whatever this is still going on. What if that was her screaming in there again? Raina hadn't thought of this, but judging by the different women she had found, she figured it was someone new. Look, Peter, just give me one more night. One more night for what? To find out who else gets killed? To find whoever's doing the killing crawling into your bedroom while you're asleep? No. Raina swallowed hard. Just one more night. You can stay with me. Peter seemed to relax a little at this suggestion. Let's just wait. We can do something about this tomorrow. Just give me one more night. One more night, Raina. Peter frowned, but that's it. Raina felt guilty for what she was about to suggest, but a plan had been forming in her head since Peter had first suggested calling the cops. But I need food, Petey. I haven't really been shopping yet, and to tell you the truth, I'm starving. Peter looked at her suspiciously. Why don't you pick us up something local and we can listen to some gruesome murders? She forced a smile. I don't know if I should even leave you alone here, Rainey. I'll be fine. I'll clean up before you get back and we can finish what we started. Pete seemed to light up with this suggestion. Okay, Rainey, one more night. When Peter left the apartment to pick up some Italian from a nearby Amato's, Raina got to work. She did clean up a bit, albeit in a rushed manner, putting her hair back into a ponytail as a final gesture almost to symbolize an intent to kick ass. She grabbed the largest unpacked kitchen knife she could find and in front of the open closet now, biting her lip in anticipation. There had been no further screams since Peter left, but she wasn't going in for a rescue this time. This time, she thought, she would confront her father once and for all, She didn't need Peter, and she certainly didn't need any other cops. But as she started to open the window, feeling a burst of hot air rush into her closet, she heard another scream for help. "Help! Please help me!" This time, the voice sounded familiar, but it wasn't Catherine. "I'm coming," she shouted, placing the knife on the concrete and crawling through the clothes. "Don't worry, I'm—" Raina fell sideways with the force of something metallic hitting the side of her face. "Please help me," the voice came again, this time behind her. She turned on her back to see, through blurred vision, a dark figure standing over her. She could make out the outline of what appeared to be a police uniform hat. The voice came again, softly this time, from the figure. "Oh, please, help me, Raina. Help me," the figure said. Raina felt the blow of what had to have been an iron bar hitting her face again. "Help, help, I'm a damsel in distress," the voice said, seeming to mock her now. She had no doubt now that this was the killer, and by that logic, the owner of the house. But what confused her was that the voice sounded almost feminine. It wasn't her father after all. "Who are you?" The blow came again. Raina could taste blood now. The sound of a doorbell came ringing through the clothes rack behind her, from the mirror, from the window. "Someone's at the door, Raina. Maybe you better get it." Raina blinked hard and her vision started to come into focus. The furnace was running hot now, almost drowning out the repeated buzz of her doorbell. She thought it had to be Peter. "Rude to keep our guests waiting," the voice came again, sounding muffled now. Raina was sure that she'd heard the voice somewhere before. She turned back to find the woman disappearing into the clothes. Her leg had been hurt badly, so that she had to crawl to get closer. "Don't worry, Rainy. I called the cops for you." Raina looked through the clothes at the face as the window came down. It was not the face she had believed it would be, but one which she had suspected since she first heard the voice. It was, in fact, her own face. "No!" Raina screamed, but could barely hear herself over the sound of the furnace and of police cruisers in the distance. On the other side of the window, in the apartment, dressed in a uniform that reminded her of her father, she saw herself standing in the closet, smiling. The her that was not her, standing in her own world, waved once before pulling her clothes back in front of the glass, and the mirror went dark as the closet door closed. She could hear the sirens getting closer now as she panted with sweat from the heat of the furnace. Her moans turned to maniacal laughs then, as the sirens came into the driveway outside, red lights flashing through the windows. She spit blood from her mouth and laughed, even as the front door was forced open and she heard footsteps rushing down the stairs. "Home," she thought with her eyes closed. "Home, sweet home."